live from Budapest. This is going to be a little video blog to talk about what's happened in the last day, a little more than a day now, at the Scrabble tournament, the Continental Scrabble Championship happening here. So I've been in Budapest since Wednesday night and had a couple fun days as a tourist and showed up to the early bird tournament, which started Friday in the afternoon. I actually got there a little after 11 o'clock, still a good solid 2-3 hours before it was starting. And if you've been following my saga on my blog and on my YouTube videos, you know that I supposedly have a lifetime ban from WESPA. But of course, how they handled this was very unprofessional. In fact, they never even said anything to me about how I had a lifetime ban. They just went behind my back and talked to the director about this, and apparently talked to a bunch of other people too. So one thing I learned, Anand is a good friend of mine who I've known for many tournaments here in Europe. He lives in the Netherlands, and he works in some capacity for WESPA, more in a technical role. But he's also a WESPA member because he lives in a place that doesn't have its own national association, and he just individually pays dues to WESPA in order to play in its tournaments. And he told me that on June 15th, the same date that Ference had been emailed, Ference being the Hungarian director here of the tournament, he was also emailed. Apparently all of the individual members of WESPA who were not members of national associations, in addition to the leaders of the national associations, were all emailed at that time, notifying them that I had a lifetime ban from WESPA. And this is literally the first I'm hearing of this. Like, the only time I found out, as I mentioned in an earlier YouTube video, that there was a ban at all was from Ference more than a month after it happened, when I specifically inquired with him about this tournament. And now Anand, who's a good friend, is telling me for the very first time while I'm at this tournament here in September that back in June he got an email. And I'm just thinking, like, thanks a lot, community. Like, I've been in this place, in this Scrabble community for 20 years. I thought I had lots of friends and people who liked me. And they're literally doing this massive email campaign to tell all the leaders of the national associations that I'm banned, and to tell individual WESPA members who are not part of national associations that I'm banned. And literally the only person who says anything to me about this is the director a month later. And then Anand tells me in September here, face to face. Now, I don't hold any hard feelings toward Anand about that, but really, I wish people would just like give me a heads up about this stuff first. But anyway, Anand is totally on my side. We have a good conversation about this. He knows that I've been treated very unfairly, and this whole situation is ridiculous. And I tell him that I have a plan for how I want to talk to Ference about this situation and try to convince him to let me play in the tournament. And I just want to not approach him alone. I know that Ference is Anand is very much on my side and thinks I should be able to play in the tournament, and so are Omri and Evan, who are Israeli players who are here. And I'm hoping they all can put a good word in on my behalf with the director. It turns out that Omri and Evan actually were doing touristy stuff and not playing in the early bird that day. One of them had a mother in town, and they were out on the town, so they didn't even make it until this morning, it being Saturday now. But so while they weren't handy help, they're also very, very sympathetic to the cause. But Anand was very willing to go with me and be alongside me when I talked to Ference about this. And I even told him, like, I don't need you to say a whole lot. I just want him to, like, feel like it's not just me approaching him. There are other people backing me up. I know how I'm going to handle this conversation. And I really had it planned out pretty well, I think. And I think I could have had a great conversation with Ference. I don't know Ference very well. We've had very minimal interaction, but we have both been coming to this tournament for a long time. That's actually how I started the conversation, saying, like, it turns out I asked him, he's been coming to the Continental Scrabble Championship since 2017. And I've been coming since 2016, and we've been in a bunch of the same events together. And it's kind of a family. It's a lot of the same players who keep coming back to this from all different places in Europe and a few other places in the world as well. But I'm actually one of the few American players who's come to the event on a regular basis. This is my 5th one now. And I don't know for sure, but I think if you check the statistics, I'm probably the single American who has shown up the most times to these events. And I do feel like we are kind of a family. And everyone here knows and likes me and knows that I'm a good person and has enjoyed having me as a person playing in the tournament, often the highest rated player. And, you know, a friendly person who goes out to dinners with people and all those kinds of things. And um, I feel like I could have had a very friendly conversation with Ference. There was no bad blood or animosity between us at all. And I also recognize he is a first-time director, and I think it's great that he's running an event like this. But it turns out Peggy Feely, who is an American expat living in Berlin, who actually ran the 2022 edition of the Continental Scrabble Championship, which is the last tournament in person that I've played in. She is actually acting basically as a co-director with Ference. And I didn't know this at the time when I got to the tournament site, but she is kind of the one who talked him into running it and was really doing a lot of the work alongside him in running it. And when I got to the tournament room, it was funny because it was still very early, and the two of them were sitting at the desk up front, over by, or in the back, I should say, at what was going to be the director's table, getting the computer and other things set up and ready to go, and equipment and all that. And one other person was in the room, Becky Dyer. And it's funny because there's a little bit of not so great history with me and Becky Dyer from the days of the CoCo Online Club in 2021. But Becky hadn't seen me in a while, and I had my long hair down. I wasn't wearing a bandana or anything like that now. And she didn't even recognize who I was. And when I saw them all and looked in the direction, I waved. And Becky actually just waved in a very friendly way back to me, not even knowing who it was. And it was kind of funny when I came up, and it took her a moment to recognize who I was. Anyway, I knew there was a little bit I had to deal with Becky, but that was not even the priority. She kind of stood around in the background and eventually walked away for a little bit of this conversation. But the conversation was just mainly between me and Ference and Peggy. But what happened was, when I started trying to talk to Ference, Peggy immediately and extremely intentionally just completely sabotaged this conversation. She basically wouldn't let me get a word in a lot of the time, and she raised the emotional stakes and made it a very unpleasant and difficult conversation. And I recognized very quickly that this conversation was not going to go good places with her participating in it. And I talked to Ference and wanted him to step aside and just have a private conversation with me away from that. And Anand was with me too, and he wanted to be part of that conversation, or at least observing it as well. But it was very much the case that Peggy was trying to run interference. She was not only raising the emotional stakes and being belligerent with me, she was absolutely refusing to let me get any alone time with Ference. And I would say Ference was a little nervous and anxious just because it's his first time setting up a tournament, getting stuff ready, and even though it was still pretty far in advance time-wise, he felt like he had a lot to do and wanted to focus on getting the tournament ready, and I get that. And I think he had already thought he had communicated to me clearly the news that I wasn't going to be playing in the tournament. But he did end up letting me talk to him, although it was sort of while he was dealing with some of their equipment stuff at the same time, not always kind of making eye contact. And I do feel like I started to say some good things when Peggy wasn't derailing me. But I want to tell you basically what I was trying to say to him, and I ended up getting out some of it in bits and pieces. Which is first off, and I am really grateful for him running the tournament, and I was saying things along the lines of the fact that, like, directors are the lifeblood of our tournament Scrabble scene. They're the ones who are putting in most of the work, making these events happen, and it's a freaking awesome thing, and I'm really happy he's doing that. And they are the ones who have the real power here. That's the thing about it, is that we've got these very disorganized, very unprofessional Scrabble associations, and they're getting more and more divided and split up and arguing with each other all the time. But the fact is that what really brings the people are the good events with the good directors. I can take an example of that with, in the US, the New Orleans tournament. The New Orleans tournament has changed loyalty, changed which association it's playing for. It doesn't really matter. New Orleans and the directors in the event they run are bigger than any of the Scrabble associations. They actually make the association more or less relevant by running it for their event for that association. And I wanted Ference to realize the power he has as a director here. And the other thing I tried to explain to him, he was obviously nervous about this thing about what WESPA had told him was that they would not rate the tournament if I played in it. And the thing about this, there's so much that's wrong with this. First off, this tournament is co-sanctioned by WESPA and ABSP, the Association of British Scrabble Players. Now, this is a little bit of an exception. There are a lot of tournaments that are rated by both ABSP and WESPA nowadays, but it's important to understand that ABSP is actually the much older association with a lot more history. And they run mostly tournaments in the UK, but since there isn't a big English language Scrabble scene in the rest of Europe, a lot of other events in Europe they do also get sanctioned by them. And it is the case that up until just the last couple of years, most of those tournaments were only rated by ABSP. Now, this Continental Scrabble Championship is kind of an exception because it has always really been an international event that's had WESPA recognition. But there's a great number of tournaments that only had ABSP ratings, and the events that actually got WESPA ratings were a tiny number. And in all the time I've been playing Scrabble in tournaments since 2002, there were very, very few tournaments that were rated by WESPA most of the time, and therefore the WESPA tournaments just didn't have enough data, and the ratings were kind of meaningless, and almost everybody cared more about the national association's ratings, whether that be ABSP, NASPA, or whatever your particular national association is, and the WESPA ones were really kind of irrelevant most of the time. And it is only really in the last couple of years that WESPA has started rating tournaments much more widely, and that it really started really as a political tool. They were rating tournaments much more freely in the US than they were in Canada too a little bit, than they were in the rest of the world, and sort of relaxing the standards of what they considered an international tournament to do that. And it was really a way of trying to push the US to run more tournaments with the international dictionary. But at the same time, I think some people became a little sore about this, about the asymmetry that so many more American tournaments were being rated by WESPA and not tournaments in the rest of the world. And really just in the last few years, WESPA expanded that, started running a lot more, or rating a lot more tournaments in other countries too. But generally, most of these tournaments are run by the other international associations and rated by those associations, and maybe they get a WESPA rating if they're a big enough event or a qualifying event by whatever their standards are as well. But I've always thought of the WESPA ratings basically as kind of secondary to the national ratings. And I also told Ference that I have screenshots of a conversation with an ABSP board member, and it's very clear according to that, that pretty much the entirety of the ABSP board was against me being suspended or banned in any way. And they were bullied by the WESPA board. So I was trying to make clear to him, look, if you run this tournament and submit the ratings, regardless of what WESPA is going to do, ABSP is not going to hesitate to rate it. They're going to go ahead and rate it anyway. And then I'm also saying, like, I wanted to say, like, they're not going to rate the tournament. All they're doing by doing that is punishing everybody else here who has nothing to do with this. And that just makes them look bad and more unprofessional than they have already and would cause people not to take them seriously. Literally, like, WESPA ratings already were not a big deal for many years. They've only, like, started to become a little more relevant recently. But who the hell cares about ratings from an organization that's just so obviously being so unprofessional and all this sort of thing? But secondly, like, why would they have to, like, not rate the whole tournament anyway? If they want to exclude me, all they have to do is just not rate my games, right? And that's just a tiny percentage of the games in the tournament. They could still rate everyone else's. And there's really only one reason why they are threatening to not rate the entire tournament rather than just not rate my games. It's because they want to make a bigger threat on the director. They want to make this scary enough for him that he won't let me play in the tournament. And he admitted that. Ference agreed with me. He thinks that the way WESPA has handled me is completely inappropriate, and he thinks that they've really mishandled this situation and that they were threatening him. And his basic answer was, yes, they are threatening me, and it's working. So Ference is literally saying to me out loud that the WESPA board is bullying him, but he's a first-time director. He wants his event to go smoothly, and I get it. Like, he doesn't owe me anything. And it is the case that, like, I understand, like, he wants it to go smoothly. He wants to get well established as a director and all that kind of stuff. And it would be a different situation if he was a more established director who had run events before. All of that makes sense to me. And I made clear from the outset of this that I am not expecting anything from him. He doesn't owe me anything, and I just wanted to make my case to him. And ultimately, it is his decision. And that was part of what bothered me about Peggy interfering more, too, because I feel like she was trying to sway him. She was trying to interfere in him being the director and making a decision that is really only his to make. But anyway, part of this, too, is that, like, I ended up saying to him a quote, which I actually put on my Instagram story yesterday. I'm going to read to you here, too. It's from one of my favorite books that I read a few years ago, The Cider House Rules, from Dr. Wilbur Large. I have been given the choice of playing God or leaving practically everything up to chance. It is my experience that practically everything is left up to chance much of the time. Men who believe in good and evil and who believe that good should win should watch for those moments when it is possible to play God. We should seize those moments. There won't be many. And I basically told Ference, you have an opportunity to play God here. You are the person who's in the most powerful position. Not the WESPA people, not me or any of the players, you. If you decide you want to let me play in the tournament and you pair me, you can do that. And you don't owe that to me, absolutely not. But you can actually change the direction of World Scrabble. If you do that, and then WESPA tries to bully by not rating the tournament or punishing in some way, all they're going to be doing is making themselves look worse. And you are actually going to be standing up for me and get a lot of support from the rest of the Scrabble community for the way you do that. And I feel like I saw Ference's reaction. I feel like it resonated a little bit. Not enough to get him over his initial hump of fear. And I want to be very clear, too. Peggy was very much instilling fear in him. Peggy was coming from a place of fear and upset, and she was doing everything she could to put as much panic into Ference's head as possible that if he does this, something's going to go wrong with this tournament, that WESPA's going to retaliate in some way, this kind of thing. But this is what it comes down to. This is the politics of fear. So anyway, after I had this whole conversation, I did try to talk things out with Peggy a little bit and clear this up, but I feel like there's still a little more healing and conversation that needs to happen there. Anand did walk away after a little while of this when he saw that how Peggy was derailing it. He told me he was going to talk to Peggy and Ference both later, and Anand was a complete angel about all of this. Anand is completely on my side and really wants to make things better here. And he has actually, I think, in his head developed a pretty good plan of how to do this. He wants to talk to Peggy and Ference. I believe Ference also is a individual WESPA member because there is no Hungarian association of WESPA. But then he also wants to talk to Omri and Evan, who he knows is very like-minded with all of us on this stuff as well, and the Israeli association that's behind them. And he wants to make some sort of official written appeal to WESPA from a bunch of the national associations. Maybe ABSP can be linked into it as well. And basically telling them they want them to revisit my case and to get me back into Scrabble. This insanity has to stop. And it really is totally insane to me because I'm friends with all these people here. You know, despite the sort of difficulty with Peggy in that moment. And I will admit that a lot of that's coming from a place of we had a pretty contentious set of emails and communications a few months ago about some of this stuff. And Peggy and I have been friends for a lot of years. Most of our interaction has been very positive. But things did go very south in that one conversation. And I'm very sure, based on the conversation we had, we can patch and heal all that up. But this was coming at kind of a bad moment when Peggy was still upset from that and we really hadn't had a chance to clean that all up yet. But really, she is the one who drove Ference into not, taking my request to play at all. But that's not to say he would have decided differently otherwise. But it was bothersome to me the way Peggy got involved. At the same time, I told Ference, I'm your friend. I'm going to be your friend no matter what. I'm not going to like you any less no matter what you decide here. And, in fact, we're on Hungarian forints here as the local currency. But I've been doing pretty much everything on card. I haven't even gotten any cash, except when I was in the airport in Germany on the way here, I withdrew 100 euros, which is not legal currency here, but is what they are taking as the entry fee for the tournament, since it is a European-wide tournament. So I literally had 100 euros on me. It's the only cash I had on me at all that I withdrawn specifically to pay for the entry fee for the early bird and the main event. And I had no other reason to have cash on me, and I had just gotten 2 gifts of Ference on that day. And after I talked to Ference about all this, I just gave him the cash anyway. And I told Ference, I hope he reconsiders and lets me play in these tournaments, but I want him to know that even if he doesn't, I just want this money. I took it out for this purpose anyway. I had nothing else to do with it here. I want this money to just be a donation to the prize fund. So that's what's happening. I didn't get to play in the event, and this morning I didn't get to play in the main event, but I have donated my 100 euros to the prize fund of both of those tournaments, and I'm happy to do so. But despite the sort of bad outcome there's actually a lot of good things that happened while I was there. So part of it was funny. I told you that Becky Dyer was nearby, and after this was all over, this conversation with them, and Anand told me he was going to handle it and follow up with them a little bit later. I ended up going over to a table where Becky was sitting and sat down next to her and asked her if I could talk to her. And I think she was a little bit worried about this at first and was just going on about how she's conflict avoidant. And I told her, I'm not looking for conflict here. I'm not trying to argue with you or anything, just the opposite. I'm trying to make peace here. And she was willing to help me hear me out. We had a really good conversation. And I believe that Peggy and I really did an incredible amount of healing and really improved the situation that we had. So I've mentioned Peggy in passing in some of the blog stuff, but I don't blame you if you didn't see it or if you missed it, even if you did read it, because it is a tiny part of the whole story. She was one of the directors of the, sorry, this is a Becky now. I keep saying their names backwards. Becky Dyer, I'm talking about the American player from Texas. Becky and Peggy have kind of similar names. I keep making some other things. Everything else I talked so far was about Peggy, the American director who lives in Berlin. This is Becky Dyer, who is the Texan player, who's actually one of the few other Americans who came here. And it is the case that I told Becky that, you know, I knew that she had her name on that email banning me from the CoCo Club in 2021, but I also knew that, like, it didn't necessarily mean she wrote it. It came from an anonymous CoCo address, and if anything, based on the writing style, I'm guessing that Jennifer wrote it, but it had her name and Jeff Theveno's name and Peter Armstrong's names attached to it. And it was really hurtful to me. And one thing that I did mention in the blog, I told her about this. The one place I really talked about her in the blog was the fact that all three of these people were people I had very deep personal relationships with. I had known Becky for a long time. I had invited her into my home and made dinner for her when she was visiting Falls Church, Virginia. And we played Scrabble games on my kitchen table. Jeff Theveno, I had traveled around the world with to tournaments. He and I traveled to Poland together for our first ever, or my first ever World Championship. I think he had played before in 2011 in Warsaw. And Peter Armstrong, I've known longer than either of them. Back when he was on the East Coast in Baltimore, I stayed at his place. We hung out a bunch of times socially and had been friends. And the exact reason I went to the CoCo Club online, keep in mind this is 2021 during all the pandemic lockdowns, this is just an online club we're talking about here, these were no official tournaments or anything, was because they were three players who were very good Collins players who were in my time zone or not too far from it. And they were the ones who I was looking to play. None of me even showing to the club had anything to do with Jennifer and Evans. It's just Jennifer and Evans weren't even regularly attending a lot of those events. It was just those three directors who I wanted to get games with, and they were some of my best competition available. And Becky recognized that. She saw sort of how sad or hurtful that could be. And I think that she also mentioned that it's clear to me that, like, she might have had her a view of me tarnished at some point in the past, but I feel like she's been dispelled of a lot of that. And she basically said to me like that, like, she's only had pleasant, cordial interactions with me in person, and no personal problems with me at all. And I was very happy to hear that. And I made clear to her, like, I'm not blaming you for what was in that letter, but there was a lot that was in that letter that was very offensive and hurtful to me and very inappropriate, what was written in there. But that was the weird thing about this, too. As much as I feel like Becky and I really did an incredible amount of healing and peacemaking in a short time and are on much better terms now, it is the case that she was pretty much completely unwilling to talk about that letter. And she was really cagey and weird in the way she talked about it. Not only sort of indicating that she can't talk about the letter, but that she can't even tell me the reason why she can't talk about it. And it was one of these things where this just was a little too obvious and familiar to me. This had really, really strongly the ring of something similar to this whole protective order that Michael Fuller had gotten in place with my lawyer to have these documents that were passed around for attorney's eyes only that I wasn't allowed to see. And I just, Becky didn't give me any specifics here. I'm just sort of reading between the lines intuition-wise, but I really suspected, and I kind of asked her and she didn't want to answer the question, if there was some sort of legal encumbrance there. I feel like there's some sort of hush order or non-disclosure thing or something like that. That is my best guess on this. And I don't know whether it's from Michael Fuller, it's from Jennifer Lee, or both of them, but I feel like this is their freaking playbook. It's like they're so afraid of the wrong they did and just doing everything they can to contain this story. So I mentioned in some of my documents the wrongdoing of CoCo touring the online club and this insulting letter and all that, and the fact that I don't even know if it was actually from the people whose names was on it. And it's like, what did they do? They rushed to get these other people to say, you are not allowed to talk about this letter. And I'm pretty sure, based on what Becky said, this applies to Jeff and Peter as well, is my best guess. Again, I'm reading between the lines here. But it was totally weird, and it totally sounded like people are doing some sort of weird fucking legal hijinks to cover this up. This is how you know you're dealing with just guilty, shitty people who've done incredible things wrong, who, if there was any justice, who have had competent legal representation, and the justice system had done its job correctly, would have been in deep fucking shit. Jennifer possibly would have gotten disbarred and lost her freaking career. So they're going to do any dirty shit possible to just hide all the details of this and stop it from ever seeing the light of day. Yeah. So, like, really, really good leadership here. Really good people we're talking about. But anyway, this wasn't even something I was particularly concerned about. It was just something I found kind of curious and weird and really smelled bad just based on this one conversation with Becky. But I'm really glad that I handled things with Becky. And interestingly, one other American player who was there is Sam Kantimathi, and he came in a little later while we were having this conversation. And I had a pretty good civil conversation with him too. And I will tell you that, like, Sam and I are not friends. Like, I don't particularly really like him or want to get any closer to him nowadays. But we still were able to have a pretty civil conversation. And I said something to him which is not new news. He was probably the first time he was hearing it. But this is actually my opinion on things that I did share with the reporter earlier, and I've told like a few other people, which is that, you know, I wrote that public Facebook message about him that ended up being a lot of what led to this campaign to get him a second suspension and ended up driving a lot of sympathy against him, entirely because of his cheating in Scrabble. And that was entirely why I thought he should be banned from Scrabble. It was not about his treatment of women or anything like that. I wasn't knowledgeable about that stuff. And it was only after I wrote that letter that a whole bunch of women started privately speaking up to me and telling me some of these stories. And I had no reason to disbelieve these people, but I didn't know either. This was just secondhand information I was getting from other people. And I ended up writing about this not in the main post that I made, but in some of the comments. But I was just trying to be a steward of the truth and report what was told to me and also respect people's privacy. Some people were willing to have their names attached to some of the things they said. Other people were not. And it was the case that I was trying to respect their privacy and not say things that they didn't want me to say. And also, like, this one person in particular who told a very powerful story, I really vetted with her the specific ways I said things and anonymized some of the details to put out in a way that was acceptable to her. And I think a lot of this is what led to a lot of this campaign against him starting. But she was never willing to actually speak up and have her name attached to anything and make any statements to NASPA in any disciplinary process. And I'll be very clear here. Like, I don't know the story. I know what she told me, and I think I did an honest job reporting of what I was told. But also, I am very strongly of the belief that nobody should be banned or punished based on anonymous complaints. If the person chooses not to attach their name to it, then it doesn't hold any weight in terms of actually being a valid complaint and all that. And that really comes down to what's called the confrontation clause of the U.S. Constitution, which is something I think is a very, very important part of the Constitution. And I think a lot of other legal systems have something similar to that, is that we need to be able to face our accusers. We need to be able to know what they are saying and who is saying it. And it is just a completely unjust system. It's a Kafkaesque system if you are punishing people based on anonymous complaints and they're not even allowed to know who said things and what is being said. So I have never, ever advocated for Sam to be kicked out on that kind of basis. I do think, though, that his cheating in Scrabble was egregious enough that it was something that should have given a lifetime ban. At the same time, I could accept that wasn't the decision that was made and that was the punishment that he was given. He did sit out in full. And I would say he even admitted to me, even though I was not picking on him about the harassment stuff and stuff related to that, of which I have no firsthand knowledge. And not only am I only hearing a little bit of things secondhand from other people, I was not part of any NASPA or any other Scrabble Association disciplinary processes there, so I didn't see the actual documents and accusations of what evidence there was or what testimony there was against him or anything like that. But he even admitted to me that he did have a problem with harassment in the past and that he had been taking steps to correct it and to get therapy and to do other things to improve himself. And like I said, I really don't like him, but I do see that I think there was a concerted effort on his part to improve himself and to get his life to a better place. But I also told him, and this was not based on what I heard from him then, this is a decision I'd already come to earlier, that when I came to this tournament, I knew that I was trying to get in and play, and there was a chance that if I did get in and play, I would possibly pair against him because he was playing too, and that it was a small tournament. And despite my earlier statement that I would never play him over the board again, I was willing to go back on that. I was actually willing to sit down and play against him now with one caveat. And especially because I was, trying to get my way in here and needed sort of a help and favor from the director, I was not going to be a hard ass about this and insist, but just state my preference. It is my preference if I play Sam again that I do not play on his equipment. I prefer either to use my own Tyler boards or a neutral party's Tyler boards. I'm not saying that Sam is cheating anymore, but quite simply, he has me mistrusting him. I know in my heart, I don't have necessarily facts to prove it, but I think it is very highly likely that Sam has doctored equipment in the past. And even having to worry about those things and keep them in the back of my mind while I'm trying to play a full game of Scrabble and focus on all the other things that are important, that's something I don't want to deal with. So that is my only restriction, is that in order to play him, I just want to play on somebody else's equipment. And he seemed pretty amenable to that. So, again, not really like a friendly conversation, but a civil conversation, and that was fine. So it's amazing, like I made a lot of progress in sort of fixing things up with a lot of people in a short time. We're talking about like a period of an hour, or maybe slightly more than that. I'm talking to all these people here. And everyone was pretty civil and nice to me. Nobody had a problem with me being there, even if they wouldn't let me play. Peggy obviously was a little difficult, but again, that was because of the emotions of that previous email we had. We are still longtime friends. But one person who was actually at that early bird tournament, who I didn't even know was playing, because I don't think his name joined the list until late, is Jason Broersma. He didn't even show up until a few minutes before the tournament was actually starting, so I didn't see him most of the time. But I did see him briefly after he came in the door, and I didn't say anything to him at first. He just walked by while I was sitting at a chair on the side. I don't think he saw me at first. But later on, when I'm walking around the room, I actually did pass by him and acknowledge him for a second. And then he just immediately looked at me and told me, "You're not allowed to be here. Get out of here." And I just like smiled and laughed. I'm like, is he kidding me? Like, he's not the director. He's not running this tournament. Nobody else has a problem with me here. And he's trying to kick me out of the room. I just said, "You're going to make me?" And then he just turned away and said, "I'm not interacting with you." And just like a complete fucking asshole. Like, I've been coming to way more of these Continental Scrabble Championships than you have, Jason. You are part of an unethical WESPA executive board. You've handled yourself unprofessionally. I literally have you on a recording admitting that this whole campaign against me was a witch hunt orchestrated by the Clinchies. You literally said to my lawyer that you would be willing to possibly give a statement to help my appeal process, which, by the way, he never told me in time that would be helpful. I really wish I'd known that sooner, but my lawyer was so forgetful and so disorganized, I didn't even know that when I submitted my appeal to NASPA. So clearly you've totally reversed face here. You gave me a bullshit reason for trying to put off of appealing things to WESPA, saying I should deal directly with John Chu, who was already being a dishonest asshole and intentionally not giving me a fair hearing. And you've just been such a fuckhead with your head up your ass, Jason. And now you're telling me to leave the room when it's not your tournament, when you have no fucking say here, and I've been coming to these tournaments a lot longer than you. So, Jason, go fuck yourself. But really, that was the only person who I got that kind of reception with. And isn't it a shame that assholes like this are in some of the most powerful positions of our Scrabble associations? Anyway, that was a short little thing, but there's one more funny thing that happened, because I was still just sort of hanging out on the edge of the room, sitting in a chair, and waiting for a few other people to arrive and say hi to. Actually, I met one of the guys who's a Malaysian guy who's on the board of WESPA as well. I recognized his name and face because I'd seen it online before, but we'd never met. And we only had a short conversation, but it was very friendly. And It's funny because he even kind of apologized to me for what the WESPA executive board had done. He knew I had not gotten a fair deal and they had done it wrong, but he basically just sort of shrugged his shoulders like he was powerless, like he couldn't do anything about what these assholes were doing. So literally, other members of the WESPA executive board are telling me they're sorry, they know the board handled this unfairly. But this is the problem. We've got a bunch of cowards in this community who are bending over to these fucking bullies, to these fucking idiots like Chris Lipe and Jason Broersma, and let them do horrible things to ban me from the game when everyone knows they're bad fucking leaders, bad, dishonest shitbags of humanity. At least I got a little bit of apology from him, but it still doesn't help me right now get into the tournament. And this is the crazy thing. Other than Jason Broersma, who is, I do not give a rat's ass what he fucking thinks, there is no one here at this tournament who has any problem with me or any reason for me not wanting to play. And it's only people pretty much on the other side of the ocean in the Americas who are complete, dishonest, lying assholes who are keeping me out. And all these people have to do is say, I don't care what those idiots across the ocean play. Our loyalty is to Dave. But because they're such cowards, because they can't stand up and take on the role of God, take on the responsibility they have of fighting against evil, and they just don't want to make waves with those leaders, they're just letting these leaders across the ocean keep me out of the tournament. That's the reality of the situation. But overall, I'd say it was a good day for the most part. I had a lot of social interaction. I made a lot of progress. And one thing I even mentioned to Anand about all of this is that none of this stuff would have ever happened to me. I don't think I would have gotten banned the way I did. All this stuff politically would have happened if it wasn't during COVID when we were all locked down and isolated from each other. If we had been in person, interacting with each other on a regular basis, people would have just seen I was a good, friendly guy. I was much more reasonable and cool-headed than the fuckheads who've been doing all this wrongdoing to me. They were the ones who lost their shit, who just wrote horrible screeds and lied all over the place and just made pure appeals to emotion, all this type of stuff. And it is the case that, if people just saw me on a regular basis, he seems like a good guy and all that, they never would have flown. It would never have gone anywhere in banning me from Scrabble. But they built a myth of me in people's minds in conversations that I was not part of, in rooms I was not in calls I was not on, in email chains I was not on. And people believed this myth while they were isolated from me, while they were having zero interaction with me. And they thought this gives us permission to abuse Dave from afar, to mess up and interfere with his life, with what he's been doing for 20 years, because we believe the lies of other people who haven't even been around him or seen him for years. That is what happened here. And you know what? I'm in the tournament room for 2 hours before the tournament starts, and at that time I'm already starting to repair and heal relationships and have positive reactions. And that's part of the problem, is that I haven't had the opportunity to even go in person to a place and interact with these people and improve the situation. And all it took was me going one time, but I had to fly across an ocean. I had to take 4 flights because my flights changed, and 3 of the 4 were delayed, actually. So it was kind of a nightmare travel situation even getting here, just to get a little bit of that face time to improve things with people. And the fact that I've been barred from tournaments, not been able to go and travel to them and all that, has just allowed all of this abuse of me to continue unabated without me being able to have good relations with these people and without anyone observing it. They don't care about the abuse because they can't see it, because I'm out of sight, out of mind. And I realized I did exactly the right thing in showing up here, even if I don't play, because it just makes people feel bad. It makes them see the damage that they're doing. It lets them see the unfairness that's happening to me, that you've got a good guy here who likes you, who's supporting the tournament, who's making a donation to the tournament, and you're not letting play because of all this gossip from people on their side of the world, because of ridiculously unfair bullying decisions by people who are completely unethical leaders. And it's good for me to just make that appearance and be a good guy, be likable, and build some sympathy that way. And I'm going to keep doing it. And that's why I tell you, I really hope that action is going to happen for me to go to Accra, Ghana, and play in the World Championship. But I'm going no matter what, for the same reason as I came here. Because either I'm going to play, or if not, I'm going to be there, and you're going to have to see what you're actually doing to me, the way you're excluding me. You don't get to have me out of sight, out of mind. But there's one more reason I want to go to Accra also, because that's when the next WESPA election is going to be. And I don't know if Chris Lipe is still going to try to stay on the WESPA board, but I know that if he does seek re-election, I know exactly the right things to say at that election to make sure that there is zero chance he gets re-elected, that he is off the WESPA board entirely. And I am happy to go just for the sole purpose of making sure that happens. Anyway, There's one more funny little postscript to the story of that first day, which is I was still there as the first round was starting, the games were going, and they were a little slow and late getting started, as is often the case in tournaments, and they were a little short in equipment, didn't have enough boards at first, and I'm just sitting on a couch in the corner of the room, but one of the corner tables is not too far from where I'm sitting. Becky Dyer, who I had this nice healing conversation with earlier, sits down with her presumed opponent, and they need to play, but neither of them has board or tiles with them. And meanwhile, I had brought my Scrabble bag. I had board and tiles there, and I'm not using them. I'm not playing the tournament. So what do? I say, hey, you can use mine. And they're like, oh, no, we don't use it. No, it's no problem. I don't need them anyway. So I literally just put my board and tiles out, gave them a choice of which tiles to use. I had a couple sets, got the clock set up, showed them how to use it. And the thing is that Becky was like effusive in praise. She was thanking me. She actually really liked my board and tiles, thought they looked good, were pleasing to the eye, and all this. And it's funny, like, and it has my name in small letters, but it's on the board there too. So I found it really funny. Here I am donating a board and donating, to the entry to the prize fund to this tournament while I'm not even playing, and just making a little positive contribution in the ways that I can, and giving Becky a little more gratitude and just improving our situation even more. So I'm glad I had an opportunity to do that, and I told Ference that I would be back by the end of the day to pick up my board, which I did. I went and had some good food and drink the rest of the day in Budapest, and then picked up my equipment at the end of the day. Saw the prize ceremony, applauded for the winners. By the way, Anand finished in third place, came very close to winning the early bird. Congrats to him and to all the other winners. And I went back this morning to see if Ference had a change of heart, and he didn't, and it's fine. I just checked in, but no worries. I got a good backup plan. I am going to go check out the spas here. It's a beautiful day outside, and I've been really wanting to do that. I wasn't sure I was going to have time to check out the spas here in Budapest because of the tournament, but as it turns out, now I do. So I think that's pretty much all the topics I wanted to talk about for all of this, but thanks for listening.